Welcome to episode 157 of Silver Lining for Learning. We are very excited to be talking about the Little Bookmates Literacy Initiative today with Ariadna Trapote and Federico Suarez. And I met Ari and Fede at a workshop in March that every year is held by the Harvard Graduate School of Education. It's about scaling up successful educational initiatives from being local to having a national or global impact. And I always enjoy the Institute because I meet teams of people who are doing really interesting things and try to help them expand. And I was so happy to be assigned Little Bookmates as the team that I spent extra time with. And I said to Ari and Fede that I spent 3 days with them, but it was only 10 minutes before I said, we'd love to have you on Silver Lining for Learning, because they have a wonderful model that's bottom up, that's informal, and that is free and or low cost, and that really just is making a big difference in the global South, and now are looking to bring that into the United States. So Ari and Fede, I'd like to ask each of you in turn to just say a little about yourselves and a little about the origins of Little Bookmates.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for having us. We're so excited. So I was born and raised in Mexico City, and I have 2 kids. I'm happily married, and 2 years ago I moved to Miami. So right now I'm based in Miami. I studied actuarial science, so I love everything about math and risk. I was working for a good 6 years in the equity markets of an investment bank. And after that, I went to study my master's degree in Harvard. And that's where I came up with the idea of Little Bookmates that I will share with you in a little bit. But this was in 2013. And since then, I've been focusing all my attention in education and how we can give a little twist to printed books. I will tell you a little bit more about that after Fede introduces himself.
Super, thank you, Ari. So very, very similar to Ari, I was also born and raised in Mexico, Mexico City. I still live there, even though I'm currently in Philly. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes too. I studied engineering. Not to say that I'm not that hard into math as Ari definitely is. My true passion is actually words. I think I got the major wrong, right? But nonetheless, I'm truly passionate about words and their like true meaning and significance, and how we actually construct a society out of communication. I was brought like very organically into the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Mexico almost 15 years ago. And I was into tech and mobility, but suddenly I just thought of changing towards an industry that I thought that needed lots of help. So that's how I landed inside education. I landed in books and in reading, and that's because I wanted to measure reading, because particularly in Mexico, very different, and you'll see why, to that in America. We cannot and we don't really measure how well and how much people read. Okay, so that's how Ari and I met and became partners 6 years ago. From then, actually, it's going to be like the rest of our talk. Thank you, Chris.
So I'll start with a question that will lead into your being able to talk about Little Bookmates, and it comes out of scale. All of us as co-hosts think a lot about scale. It's a core issue in improving education. And one of the things that I would observe about scale is that you can have a really good idea and you can work very hard top down to try to scale the idea. Or you can have a great idea that people are so excited about that they just bottom up, batter down your door and say, we really want to do this, which is, of course, even better as a way to scale. And I would put little Bookmates into that second category. So tell us about the early days.
Of course, no, I agree completely with that. So as I mentioned, in 2013, I moved to Cambridge with my family. And that's where I got exposed to really cool libraries and bookstores. Because believe it or not, in Mexico, we have very few. And I am an avid reader. And I've never taken my kids to public libraries in Mexico because they're so far from my house and we don't have access to those. So when I moved to Cambridge, and one of our favorite activities was to take the kids to the public library. And if you've been to Boston's public library or Cambridge public library, you know what amazing place it is, right? All the books that they have, all the authors, the illustrators, everything. So I was just mesmerized by everything that I saw. So it became a great activity for me to do with my kids. So I took them, they were 1 and 3 at the time. And I pulled them out of the stroller and I filled the stroller with many, many books, different sizes, different shapes, different prints. And as soon as we got home, I landed all the books on the floor and I let them pick and choose. So this way, we created an amazing habit of reading together. Believe it or not, we don't have that in Mexico. My mom and my dad never read to me when I was a kid. I know in the US it's pretty common. In Mexico, it is not, sadly. So I developed this relationship with my kids through the books, and I wanted it to continue when we go back to Mexico. So when it was time to go back, I said, okay, how can we continue with this, right? So I started Googling, okay, how far the public libraries are. Okay, 2 hours driving each way. So it was impossible. And then I said, okay, I'm gonna buy all the books, right? And it was a lot of money. And then also I wanted my kids to continue with the language, with English language. So I started looking for books in English and it was very scarce. We couldn't find a lot of English books in Mexico. Amazon was not there yet. So that's why I thought, how come there's no one that can lend you books, okay, and then can deliver them into your houses, and then you can have new ones over every month. And that's how the idea of Little Bookmates came. Of course, every time I pitched the idea to someone, they all said, oh, in Mexico, nobody reads. Oh, you're crazy. Nobody is gonna, pay for a service like that. And I was like, okay, maybe there are other parents like me that are looking for this and have not find a way to successfully fill that gap, right? So that's why little by little, I started in my house and I met Fede, and it was like putting gasoline to the startup. And then from there, we created a platform. We have an app, we have an algorithm, and we scale it pretty good. Right now, 6 years from then, we've sent out more than 106,000 books in all Mexico. I will talk a little bit more about where's Little Bookmates right now, but that's the story of how it all began.
Has this been, like picked up by somebody in the government sector in Mexico? They say, we need to scale this. We need to, to replicate it. We need to provide some nurturance or funding for it. Have you gotten some agencies or whatever involved in some way, shape, or form, even if it was just publishing a report about it?
Yeah, we received some funds in 2017 from the government, and they wanted to replicate everything throughout the country. But we saw that we could, from Mexico City, we could send out the books everywhere else in the country. Okay, so we created this rotation system that we could successfully be able to send out the books without being without the need to have an office space in other parts. Fede, do you want to have a follow-up on this?
We'll probably just that one time that we got like to say that well to the team of our current president, because they somehow heard about Little Bookmates, and well, long story short, nothing happened. Like, they were a little bit interested, but truthfully, the government in Mexico is far away from being really keen into investing in truthful reading and love of reading and education. So so yeah, nothing really came out after that. Punja, you had a question, I think.
You're muted, Punya.
Sorry, after 3 years of doing this, I still forget to unmute. It's hilarious. So, so Ari, before the show, you and Kurt were exchanging sort of the overlap in terms of actuarial science and accounting. So Fede, I have to say, I have an undergraduate degree in engineering as well. And I also find myself much more in the space of words. So that's sort of what brings me to education. So I wanted to highlight that. And the other interesting thing is, like I mentioned, these episodes from India. We had, I think, 6 guests across 3 episodes, or I don't know, 6 or 7 guests. All of them had undergraduates in engineering and then moved into education. So there is an organization to be built here, former engineers for ed or something that way. But I wanted to, one of the things that, when, and Chris had mentioned this idea of scale, is sort of the infrastructure that underlies. So there is the core idea, right? That Ari, you had, which is, like, how do we get books into the hands of people that there is a thirst out there, there is a need out there, how can we meet that? But I think, Fede, you sort of mentioned, or I think it was Ari, you mentioned the building of the app and the infrastructure behind. So there's a technical infrastructure, which allows people to choose and pick, but there is also the physical infrastructure of getting the books to people, making sure that they come back. So maybe both of you can speak a little bit to that, because to me, those aspects often get ignored in the discussion because the idea is so cool and we run with the idea. But I think a lot of the effort goes into processes and systems in designing those. We often think of like the artifact and the experience, but we don't often unpack what goes into these processes and systems. So I would love for both of you, either of you, to start, but both of you to speak to what it took to build that infrastructure and what have you learned in that process, because I'm sure there were missteps along the way, assumptions made, which turned out to be not right, and so on. So there's a story there, which I would love to hear from you.
Fede, please go for it, because
Okay.
Right.
So many questions in one, Punya. Come on. Okay, I'll try to answer them all. So as you mentioned, I'll separate for now the distribution part, and I'll go into that in a minute. But so basically, what we try to do with through this model is, and the technology, is to not digitalize the book per se, but its information. So that the technology for us is meant to just optimize and scale whatever we're going to do, right? Whether that is payments of on the one side from the memberships of this club, if you will, and on the other hand, we have to operate the whole thing. So it's somewhat like an inverse library. So basically, I'll go through first through through the model and then explain about the technology. So every member, so it's a family membership, okay, throughout, through which actually we deliver on a monthly basis 8 books to their homes, and then exchange them for new ones the following month. Okay, so in order to do that, we need to know which specific, not just title, but exemplar has or copy has been sent to which family, so that we can properly retrieve it and know that it's in good shape, so on and so forth, right? And so I mentioned that we push books towards their home. That means that we actually select those books. That's made through an algorithm that Ari amazingly designed, and it's been constantly modified and evolved. But an algorithm choose titles, choose every single book for every child within that family, considering different variables. Okay, and so we send the whole package, whether it's one single kid or plenty of them per family. We send every time we send every time 8 books. Now the algorithm takes care of it all. We send we'll put them in a bag, send them home. In the next month, we just rotate those books. Okay, so we need to know which books or which copies came back properly in shape, so on and so forth. Most of them do, so it's not a worry. Like, it's a natural worry for people to ask if they actually come back. However, since parents are actually saving around 80% of the cost of actually buying those books, then it makes sense to them. Okay, so basically what we did is we created a platform that, on the one hand, so we have this algorithm choosing titles and copies for every single child. It also helps us manage how many books we have in our own inventory, in order that we have a very efficient rotation. So basically, we could say that 90% of the books are at all times in our customers' houses. So that this makes a very effective way to have a huge library, if you will, but in a very small space. So that's because we have, we make sure that books are being effectively rotated, right? So creating this platform, as you said, Punya, it's been truthfully a lot of misconceptions, assumptions. So it took us probably 4 years and a half to build our first platform. And it was like a huge, very slow elephant with lots of patches on it. But it somehow took us to where we were 2 years ago, when suddenly, pandemic and many things changed. And so we had a chance to invest in making a new platform, now knowing what the model was, and actually thinking of actual scalability, being able to put this technology not just in one single office throughout which we sent books across the whole country. So now that we could put this technology in every single household, and so that we can make every little or personal library, or even a school library, any library, into a library to be shared in the near community. I don't know if this somehow answers your question. I mean, it's 6 years of history, but yeah.
No, thank you for that. So, Ari, if you want to add something to that.
I just want to add a little bit in terms of scalability, that we spend a bunch of time doing this by hand with an Excel. So this is another thing that I would tell anyone that is willing to start a startup and scale it. So first, understand your model, even if it's in Excel or hand by hand. And then after you really understand what it's needed, then bring technology in so it can help you go faster. Because I know many people invest in technology at first and without knowing and understanding everything they need to do. So that's in terms of scalability.
So
Thank you.
is great. Ariadna, I mean, I had the same reaction to US public libraries because I came from China. in 1990s, I don't know, Punya and we went to graduate school together. We went to a library in Urbana. That's where I took my 3.5-year-old now, who is in his 30s now. We spent, I mean, it was amazing. Not only they had books, they had video, they had everything. In China was impossible. It was 1990s. It was, oh my God, this is your school. This is great. So I think now you also mentioned about technology, because I was really wondering, I was thinking about in my village in China, would this model work? Could this model work? Probably not. So because the issue has nothing to do with the reading books, it really has to do with the access. So because Punya mentioned the question about cost, sending something away definitely cost. And because if you are so poor, you don't really have money to send the book back. I mean, really, it's just cost. The just postage is a big thing. So I was wondering about also today, your thoughts about delivering them on phones, right? Delivering digital copies, digital books. We all know the value of holding a physical book for young children. That's tremendous. That is absolutely different than just holding your phone, your iPad, So I was just wondering, is it possible, thought about, because in my village, looks like everybody has a smartphone. I don't know how they get it, but postage could be difficult. And especially having them go there, send this back. The posting system is not even there in a way than a digital format. So I'm sure you've thought about it. I just was wondering if you've been thinking about, this can apply to many underdeveloped countries, areas.
So just for you to know, in Mexico, the postal service doesn't work. I mean, at all. Okay. So when the pandemic came, what we did is, we sat down and reassessed everything that we were doing. And because a lot of people were still texting us and emailing us like, oh, we need our books, we need our books. So that's when we decided to create franchises. Okay. What's the idea behind a franchise? So the idea is that, as Fede said, in every household, you can have a little bookmate, right? Because we have the technology and you can have the books in your house and you can service your community. Okay, so this way you don't have to rely on postal services. You can bring the books to the houses or meet at a certain point for the interchange of the books. Okay, so right now we have 4 operating franchises in Mexico, 1 in Colombia, and 1 pending in Spain. So we were able to replicate this model as simple as having access to Wi-Fi, download the app, or accessing our web platform. So you can introduce your own books, have the families sign up, and the algorithm and platform will make the match, and you can deliver the books to the people in your community. That's how we've done it.
And yeah, I just wanted to add on top of this that in order to actually serve a community, you can deliver a package of books to every single household, like your neighbors or whatever, and you could actually use, for instance, a school, which is somewhat of the model that we are actually testing right now in the US. So instead of going to 20 different houses, you can go once a month to one single center spot and make those book exchanges in that place, so that you make it really cost effective, and people are actually eager to have different books, so that then the distribution cost can actually pull all the way down to almost nothing if you think about it. And so that's the distribution. Now about the inventory cost, which, I mean, in order to get books are not cheap, and good books are even more costly, right? So However, 99% of the books that are currently existing in our planet are not sitting in libraries nor bookstores, are actually sitting already in our shelves, So what if we could actually pull all of those books and put them to serve to your own community? So you could, like, in your own town, these champions could just like ask for people, okay, let's gather a whole bunch of books, and then this system can manage them effectively so that we can rotate them across all of our families and houses, right? So, I mean, it's just an idea. We haven't deployed that, but our platform can actually execute. And so it doesn't matter if the book is in Chinese, like every single title, as long as it has an ISBN, which I think it's across the globe, as long as a book has that, that's good enough for our platforms to work with it. Yeah.
So this is, well, I think you are starting not really a book distribution system. It's really a new reading culture in Mexico and in Colombia. I think that's where the significance, I'm sure, Chris and Kurt and Puna, you're all aware. In the US, remember there was many years ago, there was the Great Books Foundation. Remember the Great Books? So they want, it's a foundation. They want people to read the great books, right? And one of the things they do is they sign up with the community school to have discussion groups. So what you are describing sounds really interesting. You could start a community, have discussion, have conversation, because reading can be individualized, but also group can react to something different. I was just wondering, are you aware of the movement I've read about? It's called tutoria in Mexico. It is tutoria. It's like basically children tutoring each other, especially young women in villages, and they learn by mentoring, by peer tutoring. So it's helping a lot of the young women gain literacy, mathematics. If you could really combine with them, might be very interesting. Tutoria, like tutoria, RIA, TUTORIA. It would be actually quite interesting to think about how do you rest on existing community groups and to push this, and there are a lot of, like Punya was talking about in India, you have so many volunteer groups, but I think making this as a social movement matters tremendously. And I hope Amazon will be donating a lot of money to you and help you to distribute the system. That might work as well. So you, who knows, right? And anyway, thank you guys.
Just a little comment that's very interesting that you said about tutoria, because the model that we're implementing right now in the US, it has to do not only with the delivery of the books, but also with Mexican tutors for the kids. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute.
Maybe I'll jump in here. What you're really doing is providing opportunities to learn. When I was a young kid, moving into second grade, my first grade teacher told the second grade teacher I didn't read very well. And I took that not too well. I was stuck with the Crow group. But fortunately, we had an opportunity to learn. The library there was 1 block from my elementary school. So every day after school, I was at Irving Elementary. Chris probably knows where Lincoln Avenue, about High 100 is, close to there, Chris. And, I was 7 years old. In today's world, parents wouldn't let their kid, go hang out after school in the library and walk a mile or 2 home by themselves on busy streets. But I was able to read 120 some books and do book reports on all of them. And it helped me tremendously in my career. So you're providing similar opportunities to learn. I wonder if you have a couple of testimonials. I have 2 questions. The first one is, I wonder if you have a couple of testimonials from parents that you would like to share with us. So what have you heard from the far reaches of maybe rural parts of Mexico that were emotional in nature, that you've saved because they were so wonderfully spoken? Do you have anything that you would like to share with us on the show?
Well, we have many, thankfully. So we call it moral salary. So all the good comments that we get from parents is enormous. We have so many parents telling us like, thanks to you, thanks to Little Bookmates, my kid fell in love with reading, or we were able to read so many books together, or my kid discovered that he loved architecture because you gave him a book about that. Because that's another thing that we do with Little Bookmates. We select the books for the kids, so the families don't do it themselves, because we know that kids and parents sometimes don't know what are the appropriate books for themselves, right? Or for their kids. It's like when it happened to me, my kids went to the book fair or to the library from the school or whatever and came back with a Pokemon book, or a book that it was not age appropriate, or it did not have the values that I wanted to read with them about, or whatever. So in Little Bookmates, we select the books for them, and we are able to give them different stories that they would have never read if it wasn't for this service. So all the comments from the parents come from that part, like the human connection that we were able to get from reading with our children through the books. It was amazing. So when COVID came and we had to pause everything, parents were saying like, oh, we need the books more than ever.
Mhm.
So we have a lot of testimonies in our website, and it's amazing to hear that they're actually using the service.
Yeah,
Fede?
I'll just add two very specific ones. So, unfortunately, before franchises, we didn't like the distribution was made through a third-party service such as FedEx. Okay, and unfortunately, since that happened, we didn't truly get the chance to physically meet the parents on a regular basis and get their input. Right. However, it was very common. Like the delivery guys, they were regular for us. They came in our offices on a daily basis. So actually, we had a bigger rotation to that of the biggest libraries in Mexico, and just in a very small space. But not to say, the thing is that these delivery guys were like, at the very beginning, they were like shocked because they didn't know, at the beginning, they didn't know what the packages contained, okay? Because they were all sealed and so on and so forth, right? So when they got to our customers' places, and children came out regularly with the parents, and they were like truly enthused, like, because it was a package not meant for their parents, but for the children. And so it's truly exciting as a child when you get a package with your tag on it, right? And so the delivery guys were like, so what are you packaging inside it? This is like crazy, because we get customers like really excited and the children coming out. So that's this was happening like regularly. And on the other side, after the franchises started, they actually started with my mom. We tested with her because we figured if she could handle the technology, then anyone could, right? Just to say that, well, and she's also a teacher, and of course now she's a grandma. But the thing is that, she's still truly passionate about it, and she says like every now and then when she got to the customers' houses, the whole family just came out, like both parents with their children, like truly grateful. And she came up to me in like tears shedding, so on and so forth. Like it's truly nice to hear how families are happy. And our best KPI, because we have to be empirical too, is that the lifetime value of these families tend to be above 5 years being like a regular customer. Like so. Yeah, it's truly good for those who actually subscribe. That's the hard part, but yeah.
So Fede and Ari, you've talked a lot about what parents are telling you. As Punya has mentioned, we've had a lot of shows in India, involving India, entrepreneurs who have moved from the field of engineering to education. You've moved from, fields of engineering, actuarial science, mathematics into education. We have people listening to this show who might be thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, who might be thinking about switching from a STEM field. Can you tell us what's been the most satisfying parts of your job? What do you look forward to doing? And why do you keep doing it? So as to maybe be a role model or inspire others to follow in your footsteps or to lead similar lives. What can you tell them?
For me, the most exciting part is to be able to help others and to use my brain to help the underserved ones. So I have the obligation to give back and not just to make money for myself, to create an industry, to create jobs. By giving kids physical books, I'm giving them opportunities. By giving the means or ways to connect with their parents, I'm giving them human connection. And that for me is way more important than any financial salary that I can get.
Wow. So from my end, I have two answers. The first is that, so as I mentioned, I'm all about words, and I truly believe, and I've seen like books, not a book per se, but being a reader changes my life constantly. Like it actually challenges me to discover new things, and so basically, the process of being able to learn through books, and not just because of the content, but because of the words. The more I read, the more vocabulary. And vocabulary means like having a bigger span of possibilities to actually create more meaning for whatever I experience. So that, like, being able to help others to have that kind of experience, for me, that's incredibly marvelous. And on the other side, I think from my end, this is just me, that we got lucky, is the possibility to work with Ari. So we've made a freaking fantastic team, and that's been just like an incredible adventure, like considering all the ups and downs that we've been through. But that, I mean, I just got lucky. I hope everyone gets the same opportunity though. Yeah.
Thank you. Chris?
So I am not an expert on literacy. Let me begin by saying that, but I have had the privilege over a 5-year period of working with colleagues who were experts on literacy at a program called Reach Every Reader at Harvard that's been sponsored by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. So I'm going to channel those people. What's really powerful here, and I think we've said this before in different ways on the show, is the family reading together. And it's making that special time for parents and children to interact with one another about intellectual and emotional things, as opposed to logistical things, which is often, where just because of family dynamics, things end up. And that's especially true, as you know, in families that have been marginalized. The parents are extremely busy just trying to keep a roof over the head and food on the table. Often, if they're interacting with the children, it's kind of about managing the household. And the chance to have this different kind of interchange is really important. And the books, again, I'm channeling now literacy experts I know. The books are evocative. The important thing is not reading the story from the front to the back. That's okay. But what's really important is having what's called a dialogic interaction with the child. So let's say that you're reading Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And the first sentence is Goldilocks went out into the woods one day and got lost. Now, one instinct is to read the next sentence. Another instinct is to say, why do you think Goldilocks went into the woods? You know, was she wasn't supposed to. Was she a naughty girl? Was she an explorer? Was she concerned about climate change and she wanted to go check out the trees? And then the child answers, and that dialogic interaction is actually more powerful for building literacy than just reading the book cover to cover. So I think the insight that you had that's so powerful isn't just here's a book subscription service and your teacher will get the books and hand them to you, because there were subscription services like that in the US when I was growing up, and the teacher was the intermediary, which actually made you less likely probably to read the book. When it's the parent, it's really special and different. But I want to make sure that we have a chance to talk about the next challenge in terms of scale, because what impressed me so much when we were at the scale workshop at Harvard and I was trying to help you is that you're not just resting on your laurels and saying we've got this franchise model that works across global South countries and with Spain a global North country. You're saying, let's come into the US and let's look at populations in the US that have been marginalized and marginalized in terms of reading and see what we can do. So I'd love to hear you describe that, and we can all brainstorm with you about how that might scale.
Yeah, sure. I just want to give you two statistics that are significant in the US. So did you know there are more than 10 million Hispanic students in public schools that read below grade level right now? And also 60% of students who cannot read proficiently by the end of fourth grade will end up in jail or welfare. That's been said by the Department of Justice. So this can give you a glimpse of how important being able to read is. But as Chris mentioned, we are tackling not the literacy problem, but the illiteracy problem. Okay, illiteracy is the love for reading. Okay, so when you are illiterate, is that you don't know how to put words together. That's phonics and everything. We don't tackle that. Illiteracy is when you go and pick up a book and read for fun. Okay, so that's what we're trying to solve here. We want to help kids to love to read so they can read to learn. And as we've seen in Mexico and with the Little Bookmates model, first you have to instill the love for reading in the homes with cool, amazing books with illustration, big fonts, colors, and with parents or family members that can go and read with you, okay? So you can have a positive connection in your brain towards books and towards reading. So what we're doing right now in the US is we're trying to give service to this Latino or Hispanic students in the US that don't have resources in their own language, meaning especially physical books, okay, so they can read with their families. And all the solution is student-centered, as Chris helped us how to frame it. It's student-centered because we give them the physical books in Spanish and English or bilingual to read at home, but we also give them tutoring sessions. As Young said, that is very, very important. And we give them, the sessions are online and are with Mexican or Hispanic tutors. And essentially what they do in the sessions is like a book club. And it's not about what was the book about or what's the main character or what's the plot, but it's about what the book made you feel. As Chris said, the dialogue, right? I mean, It creates empathy. What did you think he was going to do? If you were in his shoes, what would you have done? You know, all these kinds of questions that are not right and wrong, right or wrong, but it creates a dialogue. So the student, it's more empowered and has more interest in reading and into participating. Because what happens when everyone reads the same book? Then if someone gives an opinion different than the one that you have thought, then you say, oh my God, maybe I'm wrong. And I will not say it out loud because they will make fun of me. So I will keep quiet. So through these sessions, through these book club sessions where everyone is reading a different book, we want to create this empathy, this dialogue, so kids can have a better attitude towards books. And the third part of 311 literacy is the access to an online library so they can have assessments and see if they're improving in their reading comprehension part. So that's what we're trying to do. Fede, do you want to comment a little bit?
I think John had a comment over there.
Oh, that's all right. Go ahead, Fed. You can go on, then I'll just come after you. Go ahead, Fed. Feel free to add.
Oh, well, thanks. So, Chris, as you mentioned, there's a big question mark that we need to tackle, and that is the dynamics inside each household in the family, because it's it's really hard to actually have the parents who don't really have the family tradition behind them to actually deploy this on a regular basis. So they don't have that tradition. They don't have, even so far, they don't have the tools, and they don't know how to properly execute. So part of our Chris's mentoring that we had was how to actually test this on the run. And so right now we are in field testing what would happen if we send books to every single house, of course culturally appropriate books, and how can we help the parents or the aunts or the abuelas or whomever they live with to actually engage with the children and the books. So that's the huge question mark, because even if we send books to their places, if they're not being picked up, it's going to be pointless, right? So right now we're completely testing this kind of a hypothesis that we've made. So thank you, Chris, for that. And we'll let you know hopefully about the results in a couple of months. But so that's the big question. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be focusing on communication to these parents so that we can help them with little bits and pieces of practical tips on how to engage with their children, because they don't know how to even find the time to do it and how to do it, so that it's a fun activity for them to do. So that's our main focus in these current weeks, actually. Yeah.
So thank you. Mike, I have a comment and some suggestions. I think first of all, Ariel, when you use that data about 6-7% will go to jail if they don't read, I would be very careful. I have examined that data. That's a very kind of what I call hidden racist suggestion. Basically, who cannot read by 3rd or 4th grade is disadvantaged, immigrant, minority children. So when you use that data, it sounds like you're promoting if you could read by 3rd grade, you will not go to jail. I am not sure that's true. And that's so that data is being misused, and it really came out of the 2 reports, kind of early reading reports, came from, that's correlational data. That's not causality data. So I would remove that, because reading is important. You don't need that justification. You don't need to say you will not go to jail if you read by 4th grade. This is a lot of Republican-controlled state have been trying to use the same reading data to retain children, in 3rd grade. You cannot be promoted. Who doesn't get promoted? It's the minority, the poor immigrants. So that's action data used to against. But a lot of civil rights people don't understand that. They say, well, let's focus on reading when other kids are doing a lot more different things. So anyway, that's just a quick comment. I would really remove that. It does not really solve the problem. But I think the reading you're trying to do in the US would be quite interesting. Like Chris suggested about family. However, it's another piece that might be interesting. I think is siblings. Is that, you know, a lot of adults may not have the time or space to truly be reading together, or they may not even be able to read together. They may not even have the literacy to read. They would enjoy what children can bring back with literacy. I just always remember this, you know, my whole family is illiterate. And when I could read, I could share information from books with my family. So the children become the information gatherer from outside the world, from the book. They bring imagination to their family. So my father, my mother, you know, they just kind of love to hear me talking about crazy things I read from the book. And that was really, really interesting. Another thing I was thinking about family relations. If you have like siblings, maybe older siblings always do take care of younger siblings. They could be the leader of the tutoring of all those sessions. So just a couple of suggestions I was thinking about.
Those are great. Thank you. Thank you for those very valid points.
So I don't have a question, I have a comment. But first of all, I just want to thank Zhao for the point that he made, because it's very interesting how, because clearly you're coming at it with the best of intentions, right? There is no questioning that, but how those sort of political tropes can be used / misused in ways I think is very important to recognize. And you know, it's sort of the same trap that sort of EdTech falls into quite often, where it's like, oh, we give a laptop to every child, how come math scores haven't gone up? And not recognizing there are larger structural, societal, you know, cultural barriers, that are economic barriers that are getting in the way. And it's not access to X that's the cause. That is a bigger issue there. That doesn't in any way mean that, you know, children shouldn't have access to books, or, you know, but the rationale cannot be that they're, you know, what, like how Zhao put it. So I really do want to underline that, because I think that's very good. Thank you, Zhao. That was great. But I just wanted to say a couple of things. There's this wonderful series of movies by the Indian filmmaker Satyajit Ray, which is about this little child. This is this trilogy, Apu trilogy. If you ever get a chance, see it, it's among the greatest cinema ever made. But there is this moment in this film which sort of struck me, Zhao, when you were speaking, where his mother is illiterate, his father has passed away, and this kid goes to school and starts, and I'm tearing up thinking about it. And he's just sitting there with his mom in the lantern, and this poor, they're dirt poor. And he's telling her about, like, you know, this is the earth, and this is the lantern is the sun, and this is how you get day and night. And then it's just, see, when you put water here and you take a pipe, and, you know, the water flows down because this is at a higher height and there's more, I mean, and she's just sitting there staring at this kid, you know, just proud of him. And it's just this amazing moment which speaks to the power of learning and growth and development, which I think has always stayed with me as a beautiful cinematic moment, but has resonated at another level about education and learning. And so, like I said, I really don't have a question. The comment I had was that thank you for what you guys are doing, because all of us here in this space right now on the Zoom screen are here because of books, because of reading, because of learning. We wouldn't be here today. Growing up in India, libraries were the only thing. There were 2 libraries when I was growing up in New Delhi, which had any good collection of books. One was the USIS and the other was the British Council. And I had memberships, multiple memberships in both libraries, because I could go there only once or twice, once a month or once every 2 months, because it meant taking a bus from where I used to live, changing buses 3 times. And so I would go with these bags of books. I would go check out like 15 books. and come home, and for the next month I was happy, right? And then you go back again, and what you are doing is giving children that opportunity. So I just really want to underline and emphasize that. And if you can find that clip from the Apu trilogy, it is one of the best advertisements that you can get of the power of learning, because it speaks truly in a very impoverished space. This mother recognizing that something magical had happened here, right? That something had happened which changed his world and her world in ways that they can't even fathom or anticipate. My mother has this amazing story of when she was a little kid going to this village, and she's written about it too, where she would come and she would just spout stuff about stuff she had learned in school. And every night, people from the village would come and sit and listen to this 8-year-old girl spouting about whatever she had learned about, like, countries like Africa. There is a country called Africa, and there are people who live there. And there is a thing called an airplane, which, you know, whatever an 8-year-old would know. And those have always stayed with me. And I think that what you guys are doing is just so impressive and commendable. And I do want to also go back to the point that I made earlier, that, and I think this is where I think, Ari, your actuarial science background comes in. I think, Feda, your engineering background comes in, because you're thinking of the deeper infrastructure that allows for this to happen. There are lots of well-intentioned people who want to do good work, but don't have that skill set. So their work stays in a sort of a local way, and it's good and it's powerful, but it doesn't scale. And I think that's something which, you know, coming back to Kurt's point about like what information would you give other entrepreneurs? I think it's that. It's really that, think about the system and the processes, because at the end of the day, those have to scale. You know, good intention will only take you so far. So anyway, like I said, I had so many ideas in my head came sprouted from this conversation that I felt that I just had to share. So thank you.
No,
So I have just add one thing, just one. I mean, not to add, just to highlight what Punya was talking about. Is the power of the children in extreme conditions. They can be very valuable. The natural power of learning can bring new ideas back to improve the family, the village. That's really powerful. So thanks, Punya.
and that reminds me of a quote from a book that I really like, that it's the book is called Originals by Adam Grant. And one of the quotes is, the innovation and economic growth rates of entire countries can be traced to the books we read to our children. So it only speaks to what Punya was saying. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give these kids opportunities, because they deserve to have amazing books in their hands. They don't have to walk for hours or take buses or take, you know, days in order to get amazing books in their hands.
So as usual, we have more things to discuss than we have time. I want to make one point and then thank you, and then turn it over to Kurt, who has a couple points and also can talk about the next show. The point I want to make is that you said that you really have to love reading and love the books. And I think that many mistakes are made by well-intentioned people when they draw up reading lists for kids. Because as a parent, I went through this with 3 children, and the books were awful. They were preachy, they were politically correct, they were kind of in your face about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Just the kind of thing that would turn kids off to reading. And you know, the Harry Potter series is a reminder that you can bring up these issues that relate to ethical concerns and that mirror problems in the human world, and suggest good strategies for dealing with those, and at the same time make it engaging and fun and deep and rich. So the algorithm is really important. And your knowledge behind the algorithm is really important, because it truly has to be books, as you say, that the important thing is not so much what you think, but what you feel when you're trying to instill love of reading. So This has been a wonderful show, a really deep and evocative show. I'm so happy that you made the time to be with us. Kurt, you can make your points and then tell us about next week.
So there might be people interested in doing research on Little Bookmates or replicating it. How do people get your email? Is it on your homepage, or should they talk to Chris and get your emails that way?
Well, you can always find us on our website. We have Instagram, Facebook as well, littlebookmates.com. As we said, we have franchises, and we can replicate this anywhere, the Little Bookmates model. And if you're in the US and you think your school can benefit from this through 1-1 literacy, you can also reach out to us, and we can make it work as to provide this program to Hispanic or Latino kids.
And apparently, Punya says the link is on the Silver Lane for Learning website for this particular show. So take a look at that. Thank you, Feda, and thank you, Ari. It's been, as Chris said, it's been a wonderful show. It's really excellent to have you with us today. Next week, we'll be talking about a little older students, because we're going to be conversing with Margaret Korosek from the University of Leeds, who's the Dean of Online and Digital Education. And she's going to try and bring with her Now's floor. Next week, the floor will not be the ceiling. We'll be talking to Now's floor about learning experience design as well. And the title of episode 158 is Using Intentional Design for Developing Online Programs at Scale. See you next week.